Okay, so today's a little different because instead of me just going out and finding stories on my own, I actually asked you guys in the comments a few weeks ago to send me your most honest stories. The ones where you told a hard truth, or someone told you one, or you finally came clean about something you'd been sitting on for a while. And genuinely, the response was way bigger than I expected. So today we're reading through some of the best ones you sent in. And honestly, some of these are going to hit different because they're real, they're from you guys, not just something I dug up on Reddit. So let's get right into it. I've got something running in the background here, and let's go through some of your most honest stories. Okay, first one up, and this one genuinely made me sit back for a second when I read it. Titled, "The Time I Told My Boss I Made the Mistake Instead of Letting My Coworker Take the Blame." So this person wrote in and said, "A couple years ago, I was working at a job where a pretty significant error happened on a report that went out to a client, cost the company a decent chunk of money to fix. My manager pulled the team together and asked who was responsible. And honestly, in that moment, I could have just stayed quiet. Another coworker had actually touched that report last as well, and it genuinely could have looked like it was her mistake instead of mine if I'd said nothing at all. Nobody would have known the difference, not even her, because the changes overlapped in a way where it wasn't obvious whose edit caused the actual problem." Okay, that's already such a specific kind of pressure. Like, having a genuine out available to you, and still having to decide whether to take it or not. But I couldn't do it. I raised my hand, told my manager it was me, walked through exactly what happened and where I went wrong. My manager actually seemed a little surprised, said most people in that room would have stayed quiet given the chance. I got a formal warning for it, which stung, but honestly, I've never regretted being honest about it. What still gets me is, a few months later, that same coworker made a mistake of her own. A real one this time. No ambiguity at all. And she came straight to me and told me before it even got discovered, because she said watching me own my mistake months earlier had actually changed how she thought about handling her own errors going forward. Okay, that's genuinely such a beautiful ripple effect from just doing the honest thing when nobody would have even known otherwise. Like, you didn't just take responsibility for yourself, you actually ended up shifting how someone else approached their own honesty later on too. And that's not nothing, that's actually a pretty meaningful thing to have happened because of one decision. I love this one, honestly, because there's no drama resolution needed here. No dramatic twist. It's just genuinely a story about someone doing the harder, more honest thing when the easier, dishonest option was sitting right there available to them. Thank you for sending that one in. Alright, next one, and this one's a little more bittersweet, titled, "Telling My Sister the Truth About Why I Stopped Coming to Family Dinners." So this person wrote, "For about 2 years, I quietly stopped showing up to regular Sunday family dinners, and I never really gave anyone a clear reason. I'd just make excuses, said I was busy, tired, whatever. Truth is, every single time I went, my sister would make these small comments about my weight, my job, my relationship status, dressed up as jokes, but they never actually felt like jokes to me. Nobody else in the family seemed to notice or say anything about it, so I just started assuming maybe I was being too sensitive, and it felt easier to just quietly stop going than to say anything and risk being told I was overreacting." Yeah, that specific kind of comment, the ones dressed up as jokes, so if you push back, you're the one who, quote, can't take a joke, unquote. That's honestly one of the more frustrating dynamics to deal with in families, because it's designed to make you doubt your own reaction to it. A few months ago, my sister actually called me directly and asked why I'd basically disappeared from family dinners, said she missed having me around, and genuinely didn't understand what happened. And instead of doing what I'd done for 2 years, making another excuse, I just told her the truth. I told her calmly exactly which comments had bothered me, gave her specific examples she probably didn't even remember saying, and told her it built up over time until I just didn't want to be in that environment anymore. She went quiet for a bit, and then she actually apologized, genuinely, said she never realized how those comments landed, thought we were just teasing each other the way we always had growing up. She asked if I'd come back to dinner if she stopped, and I said I'd try. It's been a few months now, and honestly, dinners feel completely different, lighter, and I don't dread going anymore. That's such a good example of how sometimes the honest conversation you're avoiding is actually way less catastrophic than the one playing out in your head. You spent 2 years quietly avoiding something that once you finally said it out loud, turned into an actual apology and real change. I think a lot of people can probably relate to sitting on something like that for way longer than necessary, so thank you for sharing that one, genuinely. Okay, this next one's a bit different in tone. A little more, I guess, quietly funny in a way, but still genuinely honest. Titled, "The Time I Told My Roommate I'd Been Eating Her Leftovers for Months and Finally Confessed." Boom. So this person wrote, "My roommate and I have lived together for about 2 years, and for a solid chunk of that time, whenever she'd bring home leftovers from restaurants and put them in the fridge labeled with her name, I would occasionally, and I mean occasionally, sneak a few bites here and there, always telling myself I'd replace it or make it up to her somehow, and then just never actually doing that." Okay, I'm already laughing a little bit at this one, honestly, because this feels like such a specific, relatable kind of low stakes guilt that a lot of people have probably felt at some point in their life living with roommates. This went on for months, genuinely months, and she never said anything, never even seemed to notice, or if she did, she never brought it up. But it started eating at me, no pun intended, because I genuinely like her as a person and a roommate, and I felt like I was being kind of a bad friend over something so small, but also kind of not that small if you actually add it all up over months. So one night I just sat her down and told her everything, every single time, as best I could remember, and offered to pay her back for an estimated amount, and also just apologized for being sneaky about something I could have just asked her about directly the whole time. That's such a specific kind of bravery, honestly. Like, confessing to something genuinely serious is one thing, but sitting someone down to confess to sneaking bites of their leftover pad thai for 8 months, that takes its own particular kind of courage. She actually just started laughing, said she'd honestly noticed a few times, but just assumed she was misremembering how much food she'd left in the container, and told me I absolutely did not need to pay her back, but that she did appreciate me telling her, and that honestly it made her trust me more, not less, because I could have just kept doing it forever and never said a word. Now we actually just have an agreement. If either of us wants to share food in the fridge, we just label it quote shareable unquote, instead of pretending nobody's ever gonna touch it. I love this one so much. It's such a perfect example of how honesty doesn't always have to be this heavy, dramatic thing. Sometimes it's just clearing the air about something small that's been quietly bothering you, and it usually goes way better than you expect it to. Thank you for sending that one in. That genuinely made me laugh. Alright, next one, and this one's a heavier one, so bear with me on this. Titled, "Telling My Dad the Truth About Why I Didn't Go Into the Family Business Like He Expected." So this person wrote, "My dad built a small but genuinely successful business from scratch, and for basically my entire childhood, it was always kind of assumed, never explicitly said out loud, but assumed that I'd eventually take it over one day. I went to college, studied something completely unrelated, something I was genuinely passionate about, but I never told my dad the real reason why. I just kind of let him assume I was, quote, figuring things out, unquote, and would eventually come around to the business anyway." Okay, that quiet, unspoken family expectation thing, that's a lot of pressure to be carrying around without even saying anything about it directly. Years went by, I built my own career in a completely different field, genuinely happy with where I ended up. But every family gathering, my dad would still make little comments about, quote, when unquote, I'd finally come work with him, never, quote, if unquote, always, quote, when unquote, like it was still just a matter of time in his mind. About a year ago, at his birthday dinner, he brought it up again, more directly than usual. Actually asked outright if I'd consider coming on board within the next year or two, since he's starting to think about eventually stepping back. And for the first time in like over a decade, honestly, I just told him the truth. I told him I never wanted to take over the business, not because I didn't respect what he built. I respect it enormously, but because it was never actually my dream. It was always his, and I just let him believe otherwise for years because I didn't want to disappoint him. That's such a hard thing to finally say out loud after essentially over a decade of quietly avoiding it. Like, I can only imagine how much weight that conversation was carrying by the time it actually happened. He was quiet for a really long time after I said it. Long enough that I genuinely thought I'd hurt him badly. But then he said something I didn't expect at all. He said he'd honestly suspected for years that I wasn't actually interested, but kept holding on to the hope anyway, because it made the idea of eventually retiring feel less scary, like there'd always be someone he trusted ready to take over. He said he appreciated me finally saying it directly, instead of him having to keep guessing and hoping. We actually talked for hours that night, longer and more honestly than we had in years, and he since started looking into other succession options for the business instead of just assuming I'd eventually change my mind. That's such a mature response from both sides, honestly, and it really shows how sometimes the thing we're most afraid to say ends up being something the other person already suspected anyway. They just needed you to actually say it so they could stop holding on to false hope and start planning for reality instead. Thank you so much for trusting me enough to share something that personal. Okay, let's do one more before we wrap up. And I wanted to end on this one specifically because it's got a really genuinely warm ending. Titled, "The Time I Told My Best Friend the Truth About Her Business Idea Instead of Just Being Supportive." So this person wrote, "My best friend came to me a while back, genuinely excited about a business idea she wanted to start, and she wanted my honest opinion before she invested a significant chunk of her savings into it. The problem was, I actually thought the idea had some real, fairly significant flaws, market saturation issues, pricing that didn't really make sense given her costs, stuff like that. I could have just told her it sounded great, because that's honestly what she seemed to want to hear in that moment, and it would have been so much easier in the short term. Yeah, that's such a specific kind of pressure with close friends, because you genuinely don't want to be the person who discourages someone from chasing something they're excited about, but you also don't want to just tell them what they want to hear if you actually see real problems with it. But I told her the truth, gently but honestly, walked through the specific concerns I had, backed it up with actual research I'd done on the industry beforehand because I wanted to make sure I wasn't just being negative for no reason. She was quiet for a bit, and honestly a little hurt in the moment, I could tell. But she took a few weeks, did her own additional research, and ended up completely reworking her original plan based on a lot of the concerns I'd raised, adjusted her pricing model, found a more specific niche market instead of trying to compete directly in an oversaturated space. She launched about 8 months ago now, and it's actually doing really well, genuinely exceeding what she expected at this point. She told me recently that if I'd just told her it sounded great like she originally wanted to hear, she probably would have lost most of her savings within the first year, and she's genuinely grateful now that I cared enough about her to risk her being upset with me in the short term. That's honestly one of my favorite kinds of honest story because it's a really good reminder that real support doesn't always look like agreement. Sometimes the most supportive thing you can actually do for someone is tell them the truth they need to hear, even when it's uncomfortable in the moment, especially when there's real money or real risk on the line for them. Thank you for sending that one in. That's such a great way to end today's video, honestly. All right, that's all the stories I've got for today, and genuinely thank you to everyone who sent one in. I read through way more than I could actually fit into one video, so if yours didn't make it in this time, don't worry, I'm definitely doing this again soon. If you want to be part of the next one, drop your own honest story down in the comments below. Doesn't have to be dramatic, it can be small, it can be funny, it can be something heavy. I read every single one. And if you enjoyed this format, subscribing genuinely helps me know to keep doing more of these. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.